Ah yes, my humble collection of PlayStation 1 games, but not so humble considering that I have about 75 games, not including the duplicates. I've planned this video for a long time, but never actually made it. Well, I think that today's the day, so let's take a look of my PlayStation 1 game collection. As you can probably tell that I recorded this footage before, and now I can just add my commentary. I found a lot of treasures and also a few problems. Some of the cases are in really bad shape, and some of the games even had multiple discs that I wasn't aware of. Also, in regards to my PlayStation 1 games, I know that I'm missing a few good ones, and I would really like to know which ones am I missing. Also, if you want a review of any of those games, just leave me a comment down below. I really need to emphasize that PS1 games, most in my collection, were a huge part of my childhood. One might even say that these games formed me into a person I am today. To be honest, most of the connections to different time periods and events in my life somehow tied to a different game. I remember the first games I ever saw on PlayStation. They came in the form of a demo disc, which had Hercules, Kurushi, Tenka, Abe Odyssey, Overboard and a few others, including the 3D Tyrannosaurus. This was truly a massive and almost unbelievable graphical jump from NES system, which I might go into in another video. Oh, I remember the cozy winter evening when my downstairs neighbor just knocked on the door. He came by to visit us and show off his new console. Our house was a duplex, so our neighbor lived downstairs and we upstairs, so we were all acquainted. Jan was also a good friend with my mother, and I'm grateful for it. A few hours later he left with his console. But this had been the best evening of my life, and I'm not exaggerating. Late at night I was twisting and twirling in my bed. I couldn't even sleep. I couldn't believe what I'd seen. All the possibilities in those 3D worlds. It blew my mind. Some weeks later, although it felt like an eternity, my neighbor wanted my NES and we switched for a while. Meanwhile, I had a friend who had also gotten a PlayStation 1 console, so I spent most of my after-school spare time there. He had a wonderful selection of games like Red Alert Retaliation, Metal Gear and Crash Bandicoot. He even had a transparent DualShock controller. This was amazing. He was kind enough to lend me some of his games, even since the NES times. Although I was a little shit, a total prick, who I wouldn't personally lend any games at all. But he still considered me as a friend, which, taking into an account my horrible personality that time, was a true heroism, and will never be forgotten. I remember spending my summers playing through Crash Bandicoot, Siphon Filter, Gran Turismo, Metal Gear and Resident Evil. My mother, who at that time was a single parent, didn't have money to buy me a console, so lending and visiting friends was the only way. But most of them didn't have money for games either, so we just used pirated copies and our consoles were modified to run them. I still own all of my CDs from that time, but I've gradually just bought original discs over time to finally own the original copies too. I do have double copies of some of them because I used to buy 5-game lots just to, get more bang for the buck. And maybe I was only interested in one of those games in that lot. Remember, buying original games in Estonia in the 90s was like finding a pot of gold in the end of a rainbow, but receiving a hefty bill when you got there. That's why friends and people who knew people was very important. Some had skills to burn discs, some had good places to download, and some were making copies of the copies to share them around. I picked up all of those skills over time. But the funny thing is that you couldn't even get a hold of those people very often. This was a time before mobile phones, and using an ordinary telephone or calling them just by screaming very loudly behind their window was the name of the game. That meant that you couldn't reach them unless they were at home. When I finally had money to buy a console, I could only afford the PlayStation 1 Slim version, which was a streamlined version of the original. It had some major issues with the adapter cord, which came specifically for the console, so I had to tape it several times to get it to work. But more about my consoles in another video. The software, that's what it was all about. Ah, the good old times where getting a new game felt like discovering and experiencing the world all over again. Was it all a child's overpowered imagination, or feeling and experiencing everything for the very first time? I don't know. But as one grows older, either the expectations grow higher, their sensors get numb, or, on the contrary, everything that gets made is not made with care anymore. I'm not sure. I think it's a bit of everything. But since 2011, I haven't felt anything similar while playing new releases. Skyrim kinda was the last game that made me somewhat hopeful for the future. There has been a gem here and there, but otherwise I feel that most of the new releases lack of soul. They feel dead. And come to think of it, it's a bit sad and depressing. That's why going through these games right now brings me the same joy as it did when I first played them. And even playing them today not only brings back memories, but also makes me realize that games themselves had soul. And I haven't lost mine. So there you go, I answered my own question. Now in the midst of crisis of good and well done games, I still await hope for the future, even if it comes in the form of remastering. Medieval, Red Alert, Crash Bandicoot, Tony Hawk's were fabulously made comebacks, giving people hope that maybe, just maybe, we get some equally good sequels in the future. And playing Red Alert Remastered felt wonderful. I still play it from time to time even today. Now some of those remasters are really sucky, not done good at all, or important pieces taken out, like from Resident Evil 3, I mean Mercenary Mode. The Tony Hawk's, the skate park editing, not as good as in the original, so some departments are really lacking. Now as I went through all of my games, I discovered a lot, like that some of the cases were really broken and desperately need replacement. As you can see, all of the games from PS1 era came with manuals, and some of them were really fat and juicy, like written by Pahuleyan J. Mochen. Nowadays we only get a booklet or a flyer. Some of them may have a code with the expiry date to redeem them for an in-game reward, which now has no purpose whatsoever. The worst part is, as mentioned, the expiry date, meaning that it's not like you bought a gallon of milk. I bought the physical game, which should last forever, like my PlayStation 1 games. But sadly, as you can see from those flyers, they only intend to keep the servers running till that date. There you go. Basically telling you that this game is not playable after that date. Your online trophies or your in-game purchases and everything, it's basically gone if you try to install the game maybe in 10 years. It happened to Mad Max, so I really don't understand people who only buy digital versions. The same thing happened to GTA Trilogy. People who bought it got locked out for days, no refunds, no nothing. Also the earlier versions were deleted from the store. On PC they may be back, but on a console still not. So I can take my physical edition of San Andreas and still play it whenever I want. But can you? But in regards to some of the games I have, like KKND Crossfire, Future Cop LAPD, Dune 2000 and Diablo, cost a hefty sum of money today. Depending on the condition, of course. Some of these games I have are near excellent, but far from perfect. Although I have a few manuals that are in mint condition. The game I'm most proud of in my collection has to be Darkstone, which was my main go-to RPG in early 2000s. Massive replay value and endless leveling. Me likey. I had a pirated copy that never let me hear the music, so in the menu I had to turn music to 0 to stop the hissing sound in-game. It was awesome to buy a copy 14 years later and actually hear the soundtrack in the background. I think that Darkstone is one of the most underrated RPG games. It had 3D graphics and lighter, more adventurous tone compared to Diablo. But there are many other great ones in my collection, like Command & Conquer, especially Red Alert Retaliation, a game that both emerged as a definition of RTS genre and also paved the way to a few other great ones, until the genre's official demise. Nowadays, RTS isn't the buzzword anymore. The last proper one released was in 2003, in the form of General's 0 Hour. Now, I know that Red Alert received a remaster, but why on earth isn't it on a console? Sitting behind PC and playing there makes me feel like a monkey making a fire. Moving on, Siphon Filter games are also really nice. Third-person spy action with lots of sneaking missions and also active gunplay, hidden weapons and nice soundtracks. Also in that game you hear a lot of foreign languages, making you more immersed into the world. And of course, Metal Gear. Yeah, I mean this is pure gold. Tactical espionage, coined by the creator Hideo Kojima. A fantastic game with massive and elaborate story, awesome bosses and just all around fantastic game. Hideo Kojima took a full advantage of PlayStation 1 system by implementing character feedback feature, which simply meant that characters reacted to your gameplay and your previous games you've already played. Marvelous! And then there was Medal of Honor, a predecessor to Call of Duty. Actually, there was a war between them in mid-2000s. The battle ended because Medal of Honor tried to copy Call of Duty, while Call of Duty started by copying Medal of Honor in the beginning. Medal of Honor games were historically very accurate, and enormous research was done to make it truly authentic. Unlike today's politically correct bullshit that tries to erase the history. The first Medal of Honor was done with the help of Steven Spielberg. His inspiration for the series emerged while directing and producing the World War II film Saving Private Ryan. Soundtrack in the game was conducted by live orchestra, and this made it all feel larger than life. I can go on forever naming different games and talk about them, but overall you get the point. PlayStation 1 was truly a revolution. This technology unlocked the possibility for developers to bring 3D storytelling to every home. With all the possibilities, sadly also came some restrictions. PlayStation 1 had 90,000 polygons with texture mapping, lighting and shading, 180,000 with texture mapping, and 360,000 with flat shading. All of these numbers made it possible to process geometry and bring you these nice 3D worlds. Memory cards were responsible holding your save files. They were initially 1 megabyte holding 15 slots of saves. But games like Gran Turismo 2 took about 5 slots, Darkstone took about 6, and Diablo took 14 slots, meaning that you would soon need to buy a new memory card. I have about 7 of them still full of save files. Now, as mentioned before, I am missing some games from my collection. The games I really want to add are Dino Crisis 1 and 2, GTA 2, Abe Odyssey, Crash Team Racing, Sim Theme Bark, and Tenka. I also need a new copy of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, Sim Theme Hospital, and what else? What else? Leave me a comment down below. I really love the PlayStation 1 era. I love that pure heart, soul and effort went into some of those games. Remember in the time where you didn't have the option to patch out your mistakes, the game had to be perfect or quite near it to actually launch. Of course, that isn't always possible, but definitely more effort went into the final product than today's microtransaction-infested development environment where an epic fail can just be covered up by future patches or into a copy-pasted version of next year's release. It's December, a month of joy and wonders. Ah, Christmas time. Maybe I've been a good boy this year and Santa knows my wishes. Anyway, I ran out of stuff to rant about, so I will just leave my silky smooth hands to continue on showing you my games. And I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Please let me know down below what kind of reviews would you like in the future. I'm Sillyllamaz and thanks for watching. Till next time.